everyone, I'm Charlie from Dr. Wen, and welcome to another daily Doctor Who YouTube video. As you can see from the current slide, today I'll be ranking all 13 Dalek stories from the new series of Doctor Who, from series 1 to 11. I was going to be doing a Q&A video today where I answer comments about my opinions on Doctor Who, but I haven't had many questions, so I've had to postpone it to this time next week. And by the way, please do post more questions. I've only got 4 at the moment. I'd really appreciate some more, and don't forget to subscribe. So, I've made a list of all 13 Dalek stories that I could think of. Not all of these are Dalek central, but lots of them do feature Daleks and have them enough to be classed as a main villain. So in Series 1, then we have 2 stories in the new series. We have Dalek and Bad Wolf The Parting of the Ways. In Series 2, we have Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. In Series 3, we have Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. In Series 4, we have Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. In Series 5, we have Victory of the Daleks, and Pandorica Opens the Big Bang. In Series 7, we have Asylum of the Daleks, Day of the Doctor, and Time of the Doctor. In Series 8, we've got Into the Dalek, and in Series 9, we have The Magicians Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. And we also have Resolution in the New Year's Day special in 2019, which I class as Series 12. So let's start off this list. I actually quite really like a lot of these, but some of them I just find pretty meh. So in 13th place we have Daleks Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks with a 6.1. This episode involves the Cult of Skaro going back in time to New York to try and evolve, led by Dalek Sec, who eventually mutates with a human to become basically a human-Dalek hybrid, who ends up getting killed by the rest of the Cult of Skaro. And this episode, it's very meh. I do appreciate it for doing something different, that's why it's got a 6.1 score. But the Dalek human design is really bad and weird, and they did get a bit creative, but maybe a bit too creative. It had a fairly incohesive storyline, and the characters were just alright. So it's not the best, it's not the worst, it's okay. So in 12th place we have Victory of the Daleks with a 7.7. This really wasn't a very liked episode, but personally I don't really understand the hate. It's definitely not one of my favourites, obviously, but it's still up there. It's 7.7. I actually really like the new Paradigm Dalek design, and I wish they kept it, but it wasn't very well liked among the fandom, so they scrapped it. But I really like it personally, and I wish they could be seen more, actually. It is a bit silly how there was that person who was a bomb, and then he wasn't a bomb, but he was a robot. It was just quite confusing, and it was a bit silly with all the Spitfires in space at the end attacking the Dalek ship. But I do like how the Daleks, they basically won in this episode. But I think it's a really interesting story, and doesn't really deserve the hate it gets. So next up we have 11th place, which is the 2-parter Series 9 opener, The Magicians Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. I've given this an 8.2. This episode really isn't very memorable. I don't remember lots of things about this. In my rewatch, I'm only up to Dark Water Death in Heaven, so I've got this, which is next on my list after the Christmas special. And this is quite confusing. It's a very confusing storyline. It's really confusing with Davros, but it is interesting exploring the Doctor's decision about whether to save young Davros or not, and I quite like how eventually he does. There's the Master, or who we've recently revealed as Missy, and she's just there, and overall it's an alright episode, but it's not really that memorable. Now we're getting into some really good episodes. 10th place is Into the Dalek with an 8.6. This is a really good concept about the Doctor, Clara, and a group of humans becoming miniaturized. It's Peter Capaldi's second story as the 12th Doctor, and he's really good in this. It's a really interesting concept as well, because it explores what a faulty Dalek would look like if it was good. And I'm pretty sure the only thing this Dalek can say is the word mercy, which is quite ironic because they don't have any. But it explores the inner workings of a Dalek, and it's just a really interesting, easy, light-hearted watch. That's why I've given it an 8.6. Next up we have some really good episodes. I've put Time of the Doctor in 9th place with an 8.8. Some of you may be surprised by this, some may not be surprised by this. On my first watch I really liked it and rated it 8.6, but upon a rewatch I was very slightly underwhelmed. It's still a really good story, and really good, but it doesn't include Daleks that much. There's not really a definitive villain in this. There's the wooden Cyberman, which is weird, but there's the Sontarans as well, and Silurians. This one doesn't really have a definitive villain, but there are Daleks in it, so I've kind of put Time of the Doctor in this list. This is the episode where he stays on Trenzalore for 900 years and eventually regenerates. The main things that put this episode in 9th place instead of 1st or 2nd is the whole thing with Clara's really confusing, where she goes back home but then she's sent back, and then same thing happens again like 3 times. It's not really explained why the Doctor had to go onto Trenzalore, and I don't know, there's something about the whole Doctor staying on Trenzalore for 900 years thing that I don't really like, and it was just a bit stupid how the Time Lords gave him 900 years, not the Time Lords gave him another regeneration cycle, which doesn't really make that much sense, but it's still a really good episode and a regeneration episode. Next up we have Resolution in 8th place with a 9. This episode, I haven't actually watched it yet on the rewatch, just like with Magicians Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar, but as far as I remember, this was a pretty solid story. Not one of the best Dalek stories, but it's really good. The reconnaissance Dalek design is really good, and I quite like how it's small scale. It's not an invasion of Earth like lots of the Russell T Davies stories are. It's just a simple story about a Dalek trying to get back into its own body by possessing humans. I thought that was really good, but not really something the Daleks would want to do. It kind of copies the idea of wanting to mutate to be like humans. It just doesn't really work for them, but I do really like the reconnaissance Dalek design, and I wish we could see a return in the Christmas special this year, which is called Revolution of the Daleks. Next up we have 7th place, which is the Soul on Earth and Journey's End. I've given this a 9.1. Some of you may be surprised at this, some may not, just like with Time of the Doctor. It's a really good episode. At times feels bloated with characters and plot lines, and I think Russell T Davies did really big explosive finales, which lots of the time were good, but I think he just went a bit overboard with this one. It's still really good, and I do really like Dalek stories, especially in Classic Who, but New Who as well. The main criticism I have with this episode is that it's got too many characters. I don't think Martha should have been in this, or the second Doctor, or Sarah Jane, or Mickey, or Jackie. It should have just been Rose and Jack Harkness introduced, I think. It's still a really good episode. I like Dalek episodes, and Davros coming back was good. The classic villain coming back is always pretty good in my book, and it's just a really nice episode. Next up we have the Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang with a 9.1. This is the series 5 finale, and I've given it 6th place, which is really good. It's on the upper half of this list now, and it's a really, really good episode. It doesn't involve Daleks that much, but in the second part, the closest thing we have to a villain is a stone Dalek that gets resurrected from the light from the Pandorica. This episode is... the only real words to describe it are timey-wimey. I do like the whole thing with the Doctor going back in time to see Rory, giving him the sonic screwdriver, etc., so he'd have the sonic screwdriver to give to Rory. And this is a really good episode. I like River in it. The whole concept of the second Big Bang I really like. And overall, it's a really, really strong finale, but the Dalek design was pretty meh. That's my only criticism towards this episode. In 5th place we have Asylum of the Daleks with a 9.3. This will surprise lots of Doctor Who fans because it's not a very well liked episode, and I don't really see why. The only criticism I have towards this episode is the whole Amy and Rory dynamic doesn't really make much sense. It's kind of glossed over how they actually made up, and we don't get an explanation as to why they divorced until Lots later in the episode, and I don't really think they should have been in Series 7. I think the 2011 Christmas special should have been the Snowmen, and have introduced Victoria and Clara where she never died, and should have had her throughout the entire series, but that's just my opinion. The visuals in this are really satisfying, and the whole concept of a Dalek Asylum where all the faulty Daleks go is really interesting, and I'm surprised it hadn't been done before, so I appreciate it for doing something different, not just an invasion story. Next up we have the first Series 1 episode on this list. We have Dalek with a 9.3. This was the very first time the Daleks were introduced to New Who, and it's a really, really good episode. I consider any story that's above a 9.2 to be an absolute masterpiece, and this one definitely is. It is a bit of an invasion story, but it's really good, and it shows the Doctor's reaction to the Daleks directly after the Time War, and we'd never seen the Time War on screen, so this is the first time he met one after that, I'm presuming. It's really good, and it's actually a really creepy episode, how the Daleks just picking them off one by one in the underground base. I thought it was really good. Rose is as good as ever. The only criticism I have towards this episode is the introduction of my least favourite companion, Adam. And if you don't remember him, then good. And I'm not surprised, he was a really not memorable character. But when someone mentions Series 1 of Doctor Who to me, I picture this episode alongside others. In third place, we have Army of Ghosts and Doomsday with a 9.4. The finale for Series 2. You will find lots of the finales are higher up on this list. This episode is maybe more of a Cyberman episode. Most Daleks don't come in till Doomsday, but it's a really good episode, and it's not exactly quality as such, but it's any nerd's dream to see Daleks and Cybermen fighting. We never got it in Classic Who, and it's crazy how they were doing finales of this scale after only the second series of the revived era. Really appreciate it, and it's just a really, really good episode. The whole scene with millions and millions and billions of Daleks going out of the, I can't even remember what it's called, the Genesis Arc, I think. I thought that was really, really good scene, and it's the first episode to almost make me cry when Rose left, but after rewatching it, then I don't really like Rose. So, yeah, but this episode is still really good, and I think it's really underrated, actually. Second is Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways with a 9.4, another regeneration episode, and the finale of the very first series. It's really, really good. It's the first part, maybe not so much, where with all the rip-offs of game shows, I thought that was a bit weird and unnecessary, but the second part is brilliant with the Dalek Emperor and the Doctor trying to fight it, Rose being sent back to Earth, the whole explanation of the Bad Wolf, and finally, the 9th Doctor's regeneration into the 10th Doctor. I don't really like the regeneration, not that it's like bad special effects or anything, even though it's not the best, but still. I wish it had another series. I think the 9th Doctor was a brilliant Doctor, and he really did deserve another series. But overall, this is a really strong episode, and finally explains Bad Wolf. So, last we have Day of the Doctor with a 9.7. Not a finale, but the 50th anniversary special. This is the first multi-Doctor story in New Who, and involves the 10th, 11th and War Doctors meeting. It introduces a new Doctor, the War Doctor, and features Clara and sort of Rose, but she's actually the Moment. This, you could argue it's more of a Zygon story, but the Zygons, in my opinion, were more of a subplot. The main villains were the Daleks in the Time War, and we don't actually get to see much of them, but this is a really good episode. I like everything about it. Maybe the only criticism I have is that they spend a bit too much time trapped in that jail cell, not really doing anything. I wish there'd been more Time War action. So, next time, tomorrow, then I'll be reviewing my first Classic Who episode, Spearhead from Space. Stay in tune for that, and I'll see you tomorrow. See ya.